Gateway to the World, B2 Workbook by Adrian Tennant. Unit 1, Reading. The End of School Dilemma.
The school subjects you choose in years 11 and 12 may affect the rest of your life, and choosing a good balance will keep your future job options open. But how can you know which subjects to choose? At this age, many students still don't know what they want to study at university, or if they will go at all, or what kind of job they want to do. So, in this article, we will try to give some tips for those of you facing these choices. 1. If you have a particular job in mind, or know what you want to study at university, carry out some research to find out what qualifications you need. However, a word of warning. Don't narrow your choices too much. This way, you can change your mind later on. 2. Think about what type of person you are and what you enjoy doing the most. If you take these things into account, learning will be less of a struggle. Make a list of skills you have learnt outside school and think of jobs related to them. Find out from your friends, family and teachers what they think you are good at. Being successful is a great way of staying motivated. 3. Ask advice from a government services careers advisor. They'll have your best interests at heart and may have some very useful tips to give you. 4. Don't rush into a decision. It's a very important one, and it's best not to get it wrong. One approach is to make a list of all the subjects that you like and then write down the advantages and disadvantages of each one. You'll often find that this helps you make the right choices. 5. There are also lots of things you shouldn't do. Here are just a few. Don't take a subject because your friends are taking it. You'll have plenty of time to see them outside classes. Don't take a subject because you like the teacher. Later on, you'll probably have other teachers who you may not like as much. Don't choose a subject because there isn't much homework or there aren't too many assignments. It's possible that they will increase. Finally, don't let negative stereotypes stop you from studying the career you have chosen. Good luck!
Unit 1, Developing Vocabulary and Listening. Exercises 3 and 4.
Hi, and welcome to today's Education Podcast. Not many students like doing exams, but some exams are more stressful than others. Here to tell us about one of the most difficult exams in the world is James Harding. James, what is this exam, and where do students do it?
Well, it's called Gaokao, or High Exam, and it's the exam that students do in China at the end of their final year at high school.
How does it work?
Well, it takes place over 2 or 3 days and includes exams in Chinese, maths and a foreign language, usually English, but it can also be in other languages. Then there are also separate exams for students who want to do a science degree. They do exams in physics, chemistry and biology, while art students do exams in history, geography and political education.
And why is it important?
Well, it basically decides which university a student can go to, like in other countries, but it can determine what kind of job they get in the future too. So getting a good mark is incredibly important for students. There's enormous pressure on them from society and their families to do well.
And how do they prepare for the exam?
Well, the year before the exam, high schools often dedicate all their time to teaching for the exam, and there are specialised schools too. Parents pay a lot of money for their kids to go to these schools, and Sometimes a parent takes time off work to help them study as well.
So what are these specialised schools like?
They're incredibly strict. There's no free time to go swimming or play football or do the things that teenagers normally do. Students have just 1 day off a month, and it's quite normal to start the day at 5:30 in the morning and study until about 10 o'clock at night. There are no mobile phones, and there are even cameras in the classrooms to make sure they work hard.
That's amazing! I can't imagine anything like that here.
No, exactly. Then about 10 million students start this exam on the same day, and it's like the whole country stops. Traffic stops near where the exams take place, and people don't listen to loud music or make a noise in case it disturbs the students.
How do the students cope with the pressure?
Well, it's difficult, and sometimes they're too tired or stressed to concentrate. There's some debate about the exam itself too, because the students learn a lot of information, but they don't necessarily learn to think about things in a critical way. And the other thing is that they tend to specialise very early, so if they make a decision to study sciences, for example, they can't change to a different subject.
Really?
Yes. Some teachers want education to be broader instead of focusing on the exam as it is now.
So do you think it will change in the future?
It is changing. The government has agreed to include more critical thinking in the exam, and they're considering including other things for university entrance too, such as hobbies and things like volunteering. So it is changing, slowly.
OK, well, thanks for telling us about this exam, James. It's been very interesting.
Thank you.
Unit 1. Developing Speaking. Exercise 1. 1.
So, have you decided what you're going to study next year?
Not really. I'd rather wait and make the right decision.
But you have to let the school know next week.
I know, but I'd prefer not to have to decide so quickly. It's such an important decision.
Sure, but you must have some ideas. What do your parents think?
My dad wants me to study biology and chemistry, as he wants me to become a doctor.
Wow! Is that what you want?
No, definitely not. I'd prefer to become an artist. I love painting. What about you?
I'm not sure yet, but something practical. I prefer doing physical work and using my hands.
But don't you want to go to university?
Not really. I'd prefer to get a job straight after school.
Last year, you said you wanted to be a professional footballer.
I know, but it's so difficult to get into a club, and I'd rather do something else that I enjoy.
That sounds sensible.
2.
Hi, Nina. Where are you going?
Hi, Amy. I'm heading to the library to study. Do you want to join me?
Thanks, but I'd rather go home and study.
Really? I thought we could help each other.
That's a nice idea, but I prefer studying alone.
OK. Well, if you change your mind, you know where I'll be.
3.
Hello?
Hi, Max.
Hi, Ben. What's up?
A group of us are going down to the shopping centre to hang out. Do you want to come?
I'd love to, but I can't.
Why not?
I've got an assignment I have to finish tomorrow.
An assignment? Wouldn't you rather be out having fun?
Of course I'd prefer to come out with you, but I can't.
Well, enjoy your assignment.
Hey! You know I'd prefer not to have to do it, but... Ben? Ben?
Unit 1. Developing Speaking. Exercise 2.
So, have you decided what you're going to study next year?
Not really. I'd rather wait and make the right decision.
But you have to let the school know next week.
I know, but I'd prefer not to have to decide so quickly. It's such an important decision.
Sure, but you must have some ideas. What do your parents think?
My dad wants me to study biology and chemistry, as he wants me to become a doctor.
Wow! Is that what you want?
No, definitely not. I'd prefer to become an artist. I love painting. What about you?
I'm not sure yet, but something practical. I prefer doing physical work and using my hands.
But don't you want to go to university?
Not really. I'd prefer to get a job straight after school.
Last year, you said you wanted to be a professional footballer.
I know, but it's so difficult to get into a club, and I'd rather do something else that I enjoy.
That sounds sensible.
Unit 1. Developing Speaking. Exercise 5. 1,
I'd rather wait to make the decision.
2,
I prefer doing my homework at the weekend.
3,
I'd rather not go to university.
4,
They'd prefer I got a job straight after school.
5,
I prefer not to have to study maths.
Unit 1. Developing Speaking. Exercise 6. 1,
Would you prefer to go to university or get a job when you finish school?
2,
Would you rather study alone or with other students?
3,
Which subject do you prefer at school?
4,
Would you rather have exams at the end of the year or continuous assessment?
5,
Do you prefer doing your homework during the week or at the weekend?
Unit 2. Reading. Unusual Jobs.
It's often difficult to decide on the job you'd like to do when you're young. Do you choose a job because you are good at a particular subject at school, or because the pay is good? Maybe you can turn your hobby into your career. Or would you rather follow in your parents' footsteps? Alternatively, you could choose an unusual job, and there are plenty out there. Here are 3 surprising jobs some people do. Is one of them right for you? This sounds too perfect to be true. What person, especially a teenager, doesn't like to sleep? And there are different versions of the job to choose from. The 2 most common are to test products before they go on sale or for scientific research. Companies that make things like mattresses and pillows want people to try them out and write reports. And the Hotel Finn in Helsinki paid someone to sleep in different rooms so they could provide their guests with the perfect night's sleep. On the other hand, scientists are usually interested in sleep patterns and not the actual products. Space agencies like NASA in the US or DLR in Germany hire people to stay in bed for as long as 70 days as part of an experiment to study the effects of lying still for a long time. It sounds like a great job. But would you really want to lie down doing nothing for more than 2 months? There are also other downsides to the job. Quite often, scientific studies only go on for a short time, for example, 2 or 3 weeks, so the job doesn't last long. Millions of golf balls are lost every year on golf courses around the world, and many of these go into water features like lakes. The job of a golf ball diver is to dive to the bottom of the lakes and collect all the lost balls. They get 8 to 10 cents for most of their recycled golf balls and up to $2 for the Titleist Pro V1, the Rolls-Royce of golf balls. It looks like the perfect job for someone who likes diving and working outdoors. But, a word of caution, many of the lakes are cold and dark, and it can be difficult to see very much because of the mud at the bottom. You could also face other hazards, such as snakes. Does it sound like fun now? OK, here are 2 words you are definitely familiar with. Food and stylist. But together? When people hear the word stylist, they usually think of clothes or hair. Well, look carefully the next time you see a picture of food in a magazine, a cookbook, or an advert. Is that really what it will look like if you cook it? The answer is probably not. So food stylists try to make the food look as good as possible before it is photographed. They do this in a number of ways, including spraying it with a mixture of water and sugar so it catches the light, or even using things like fake butter or ice cream rather than the real thing. To become a food stylist, you need a degree in culinary studies, attention to detail, and a lot of creativity.
Unit 2. Developing vocabulary and listening. Exercises 3 and 4.
My name's Kim, and I'm 15 years old. I recently heard a talk given by a woman called Lizzie Hodgson, where she was talking about something called jigsaw careers. I remember talking to my parents about what I could do as a career, and my dad was quite upset that I hadn't decided yet. He kept telling me it was important because you needed to know what work you would like to do, and that I shouldn't put off making a decision. However, I think it's very different today to when he was young. He started as a police constable in uniform, working at a local station. He stayed with them and was promoted a number of times, and now he's a senior police officer. So he's been working in the same career all his life. Anyway, when I was listening to Lizzie, she said she'd had 35 jobs in 33 years. And I thought, wow, that's a lot. The idea is that today, people don't have a job for life. They have different jobs as they go through life, and that finding opportunities that will take us to the next stage in our lives is like doing a jigsaw puzzle. So, it's about gaining experiences and learning from every job you do, and then taking those skills and lessons with you to the next job. So, for Generation Z and Millennials, the face of work is changing. It isn't uncommon to change jobs every few years, and people don't see it as something negative. In fact, it makes sense that as we grow older, things change and evolve. If we're stuck in the same job, there's less room for growth. Now, I know some people will point out that Lizzie Hodgson works in a creative industry and that other jobs are different. But I disagree. Sure, working in something like advertising or films and TV isn't the same as the type of job my mum and dad do. But with technology, all jobs are changing. Again, my mum asked me, what happens if you take a job you don't enjoy? And my answer was simple. I'll look for another one. But in the meantime, I'll try to get the most out of the job I'm doing. When I was telling her what I thought, I was again reminded of one of Lizzie's ideas, which was that the jigsaw is a picture that will help you find what you love doing. I can remember nodding when she spoke about this. She talked about the fact that at 44, her jigsaw picture is only half complete. So it's clear that the idea is that work experiences are an ongoing process. So, although I'm still at school, I'm trying to think about what jobs I can do in my holidays that will help me start my jigsaw. I want to do something that will give me a new experience and hopefully help in the future. But I'm not too worried about it anymore. I just need to put myself out there to find out what I'm good at. It's also good not to feel any pressure and know that I'm not the only young person who isn't sure about what they want to do in 5 years' time, let alone later in life. So, next time my parents start asking me what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, I think I'll say to them, collecting as many pieces of my jigsaw as I can.
Unit 2. Developing Speaking. Exercises 1, 2 and 3.
I'd like you to imagine that you are looking into different options of how to spend your free time. Here are some ideas and a question for you to discuss. Talk to each other about how useful you think these ways of spending time are.
Right, let's look at the options. For me, I think learning a language is a good way to spend your free time. What do you think?
I suppose so. But I spend all my time at school learning, so I really don't want to spend my own time doing the same thing.
I see what you mean. I just think it's good to do something that will help you in the future.
Yes, you're right. But I still want to do something different. What about volunteering? That's useful if you want to go to university or if you apply for a job. Do you agree?
That's a good idea. Let's look at the other options. Travelling?
Sure. But travelling costs money and as a teenager I don't have much of that.
OK. What do you think about working? At least you get to earn money.
Maybe. But I need some time for myself. After school, it's important to have time just to relax.
I agree up to a point, but I still think you need to do something useful in your free time.
OK. Now, you have about a minute to decide which of the ways of spending time you think is the most useful.
So, I think we agreed that travelling could be good, but too expensive. And you didn't want to spend all your free time working or studying.
That's true. So I think volunteering is the best. That way you also have some time to relax. Don't you think so?
Yes, I think you're right.
Unit 2. Developing Speaking. Exercise 5. 1,
Do you agree?
2,
I suppose so, but
3,
yes, you're right.
4,
What do you think about...
5.
That's a good idea.
Unit 2. Developing Speaking. Exercise 6. 1,
Learning a language can be difficult. Do you agree?
2,
I think it's good to earn some money in your free time. What about you?
3,
What do you think about volunteering?
4,
What about relaxing and having fun after you finished your exams?
5.
Travelling is too expensive for most teenagers. Don't you agree?
Unit 3. Reading. The outer edge of tourism.
In 2001, Dennis Tito, an American entrepreneur, became the first person to pay to go into space and, in effect, become the first ever space tourist. Since then, only a further 7 people have paid to go into space. That is set to change, and space tourism will become a reality for more than just a handful of people. A number of companies are now racing against each other to see which will be the first commercial company with a doable space program. One question we need to ask is, what does going into space mean? In 2018, Virgin Galactic sent its Spaceship Two aircraft with pilots Rick Sturckrow and Mark Stuckey to the outer edges of the atmosphere. But, in the future, is that going to be enough for space tourists, or will they want to go further? Over the next few years, the race to send tourists into space is going to escalate. We know this because there are at least 3 companies already selling tickets for flights they hope will take off in the near future. At the moment, one of the biggest obstacles to space tourism is the cost. But this is going to come down, just as the cost of flying is much cheaper than it was in the past. And, as other companies enter this new space race, this will force the price of tickets down. The director of aerospace operations at Spaceport America, Dr. Bill Gutman, thinks that the breakthrough will come when reusable space vehicles are invented. Such technology will not only reduce the costs, but will lead to an increase in the number of launches. Elon Musk, CEO of SpaceX, is planning to take people to the moon and back on its Starship spacecraft, and some people think that it won't be long until people will be living on the moon. However, in a recent survey conducted by PEW Research Center in the US, half of the respondents said they didn't think that routine space travel will actually happen in the next 50 years. But if you'd asked people in the 1950s if people would land on the moon, the results would probably have been the same, and that became a reality in 1969. Even if space tourism doesn't become a reality for most people, it is still likely that many of us will benefit from the current spending and research. Virgin Galactic is investing money into developing hypersonic planes that will fly on routes connecting different cities. For example, this could reduce the flying time from London to Sydney to just a few hours, rather than the current time of more than 20 hours. And space tourism could change us in other ways. Richard Branson, the founder of Virgin Galactic, believes that people who experience flying in space will return to Earth with a different perspective. Imagine sitting in an airport sometime in the future and hearing the words, "The next moon flight leaves at 2:30. Passengers for the flight should check in at the desk and make their way to the departure lounge." At the moment, this sounds like science fiction. But what was science fiction 50 years ago is now science fact.
Unit 3. Developing vocabulary and listening. Exercises 3 and 4.
Today, we welcome Dr. Roberta Schmidt to the programme. Dr. Schmidt is here to talk about the future of travel and tourism. Welcome.
Thank you, Andrew. The first thing to say is that travel has changed a lot in the last decade, and in 2020, the world of travel is very different. Things we predicted would happen didn't, and some changes have come about that were unexpected. One reason for this is technology. There have been some amazing advances, especially in AI, that's artificial intelligence. Many people already realise how this is affecting their experiences when doing things like booking holidays online. Gillian Morris, the founder of the travel app Hitlist, has said that AI will be used to provide a more personalised experience and that it will improve over time, and she's probably right about this. While some experts think that technology will have replaced most human interaction in areas such as booking holidays, others are not so certain. I believe that there will be a mix, and that not everyone wants to rely on technology.
What do you mean?
That for certain types of travel, for example for business, it's very convenient if everything can be done online, as long as it isn't unreliable. On the other hand, if you want a more individual travel experience, or have very specific needs or wants, it would be nice to be able to talk to a real person to help you with that, without relying on technology.
I see. What about how we travel?
Well, the last few years have already seen a big increase in things like electric vehicles and trials of driverless cars. It's likely that, in the next decade, these innovations will have developed beyond recognition. One thing that is going to lead to some of the biggest changes is our concern with the environment. Justin Francis, the CEO of the online travel agency Responsible Travel, predicts that one change will be in our choice of destinations. And another expert thinks that destinations that currently suffer from over-tourism will definitely see a reduction in the number of visitors. But I'm not so sure. At the moment, around 80% of the carbon emissions from a holiday are down to the actual flight. Francis predicts that governments will increase the tax on aviation fuel, and companies will try to develop new types of fuel and electric planes.
But is that realistic?
Well, some of the big companies like Boeing and Airbus are already working on hybrid planes. And in Norway, the government has set a target that all flights under 90 minutes will be electric by 2040.
And what about travel into space?
It's not unlikely. Some experts predict that by 2030, space tourism won't be unusual. I disagree because I think it will be very expensive, so it won't be something everyone can experience.
It sounds so improbable.
Well, Elon Musk has an ambitious Moon and Mars rocket program. It could be that by 2035, ordinary people will have been travelling into space as tourists for a number of years. You have to remember that for the first 60 years or so of air travel, it was only the rich who could afford to fly, and now it's available to millions.
Thank you, Dr. Schmidt. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for on today's show, but it's been very informative.
Unit 3. Developing Speaking. Exercises 1, 2 and 3.
I think both photographs show people doing a hobby. In the first photograph, we can see someone on a motorbike. I'm not sure if it's a boy or a girl because they're wearing a crash helmet. From what I can see in the photo, I think the person is involved in some kind of race. In the second photo, you can see that it's a young girl. I think she's windsurfing. One similarity is that the people are young. One big difference is the speed they're travelling. On the one hand, I think the girl who's windsurfing is going far more slowly than the person on the motorbike. On the other hand, it looks like that person is going quite slowly because of all the mud. Another similarity is that both people are outside. I think both people are happy because they enjoy what they're doing. Both activities are quite difficult to do, so they must have practiced a lot, although the girl in the second photo doesn't look very confident. Another important difference is how dangerous the activities are. I think it's quite dangerous to ride a motorbike, whereas windsurfing doesn't look too dangerous. However, I guess it depends where you are when you do it, and whether or not you can swim.
Unit 4. Reading. Tanya's blog.
Here's a question for you. Are personality tests accurate, or are they a waste of time? My main reason for asking this question is that I recently took a test in a popular science magazine, and it told me that I would be a good nursery teacher. I have to say, I was rather surprised, as I've never had any interest in working with kids, and in fact, when my cousins were young, I used to complain about their behaviour all the time. So, do you think I should change my career based on this personality test? To be honest, I think I might have been better off just reading my horoscope. After all, they're as scientific as most personality tests, in my opinion. I certainly don't think the Human Resources Department of a big company would hire someone based on their horoscope or any other such nonsense. So, I was quite interested when I found a report on some research conducted by Northwestern University and published by Nature Research. Previously, many scientific reports concluded that it was impossible to classify personality types. But these researchers claim they have come up with the first scientifically accurate approach that works. The first thing that struck me was the amount of data they had used. It turns out that they analysed the results of 3 different online questionnaires answered by more than 1.5 million people. Thanks to the internet, it is now possible to investigate using enormous amounts of data that people give voluntarily. According to their findings, there are 4 distinct personality types, and most people fall into one of these categories: average, reserved, self-centred, or role model. Of course, you can probably guess from the names that the majority of people are average, that role models are good leaders, that reserved people are not extroverts, and that self-centred people aren't very pleasant to be with. Also, the researchers found that certain groups of people were more likely to be represented in one category than other groups of people. One such group is young males, who are overrepresented in the self-centred group, while adult women are noticeably underrepresented. So, where do I sit on the reliability of personality tests now that I've read the report? Personally, I don't think I've really changed my mind. Yes, the amount of data is amazing, but can we really find out about someone's personality by getting them to answer a series of questions? And even if we can, does this information help us decide what jobs people would be suited to? Aren't things like IQ, or intellectual intelligence, and EQ, or emotional intelligence, more important? The more I think about it, the more I think that other factors play a significantly bigger role in the career someone chooses than what kind of personality they have.
Unit 4. Developing vocabulary and listening. Exercises 3 and 4.
Welcome to my talk tonight. I hope you find it useful. My name is Dr. Tina Fedorova, and I teach psychology here at the university. I also carry out research into how people make decisions. One area I do a lot of work in is looking at people's personality and how this influences the type of work they do. Now, I'm sure most of you have heard of the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator Test. This test categorises a person using 8 different characteristics, and these combine into 16 different personality types. The 8 different characteristics are opposites that you choose between. For example, are you an introvert or an extrovert? Do you use your feelings or do you think things through when you make decisions? Once you have selected which 4 are your traits, then you end up with your overall personality type. Let me give you an example from real life. This is a picture of my son, Benjamin. Now, Ben is definitely an extrovert. As a young boy, he was a real livewire, and he's always been outgoing. He is also very sensitive and friendly, and one of the most tactful people I know. So his personality type, according to the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, is ESTJ. That's extrovert, sensing, thinking and judging. All good qualities, I think you'd agree. When Ben finished school, he went to university, and I thought he'd become a scientist or a doctor. However, while he was at university, he got a part-time job working in a cafe. After he graduated, he started working as a chef in a local restaurant. I know I sound unhappy about his decision, but I really should be very happy to have a professional chef in the family, especially as Ben still lives at home, so he often cooks delicious meals for us. It also shows how accurate these kinds of tests are. Apparently, to be a scientist, Ben's personality type should have been very different. So, how can you find out what your personality is? The easiest way is by answering a series of questions. For example, are you talkative? Do you like to be the centre of attention, or are you shy? Do you like to think things through, or are you impetuous? If you answer yes to the first question, then you are definitely an extrovert. Once you have answered all the questions, you can identify your personality type. Now, let's see if you can work out what characteristic a particular question might be trying to identify. Are you a sensitive person? Of course, if you answer yes to this, then you follow your feelings. In the last few years, there has been a lot of criticism about these kinds of personality tests. The biggest problem, people argue, is that the tests aren't very reliable. The reason they say this is because people can give the answer they want to each question, and this can change the result. However, this isn't really a fault with the test, so I don't think it's fair to say these tests are unreliable. I'll end my talk by giving you an example that surprised me. According to the Myers-Briggs test, the perfect personality for a police officer is ISTP: introvert, sensing, thinking and perceiving. This is only one characteristic away from mine, as I am intuitive rather than sensing. However, it isn't a job I've ever thought of doing. I think I always knew I would teach. Thank you for your time. We have 10 minutes left for questions if you have any.
Unit 4. Developing Speaking. Exercises 1, 2 and 3.
In this presentation, I'm going to talk about Amal Clooney. At the age of 2, she had to leave her home country because of a civil war and is now a barrister who has worked on many important court cases. She is fluent in English, Arabic and French. I'd like to begin by saying that although she's married to a famous actor, she deserves to be famous in her own right. She uses her position to do things to help people who aren't as fortunate as she is. It's important to remember that she has frequently defended people and governments in the European Court of Human Rights. The United Nations has appointed her to help resolve international conflicts between countries and to investigate abuses of human rights. She also officially advised the British government on global media freedom. It is also true that she is a respected teacher and has given classes in the prestigious Columbia Law School Human Rights Institute and has taught international criminal law at several other important universities. Another thing is that she became famous outside of legal circles. She won Barbara Walters' Most Fascinating Person Award in 2015, and in 2019, Prince Charles created and named a prize after her, called the Amal Clooney Award, which will be given to young women who do outstanding work in their communities. In short, Amal Clooney is an inspiration to me for her dedication to helping fight for a better world.
Unit 4. Developing Speaking. Exercise 4. 1.
I'd like to begin by saying that
2.
It's important to remember that
3.
it's also true that
4.
another thing is that
5.
in short,
Unit 5. Reading. The richest kids around.
To be a millionaire, you don't have to be old. In fact, an increasing number of young people, some who haven't even reached their teenage years, are joining the rich elite of the world. Of course, some of these kids were born into rich families and often received their wealth. For example, by the time she was 7 years old, Blue Ivy Carter's family was already estimated to have a fortune of over $1 billion. But then she is the daughter of two of the richest musicians in the world, Beyoncé and Jay-Z. Another example of kids born into money are the son and daughter of Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft, and his wife Melinda. However, other kids have made their money all by themselves. Here are just a few examples of some of those self-made millionaires. Today, a lot of money seems to be made in the area of technological innovations, but not so in the case of Alina Morse. This young entrepreneur launched her company, Zollipops, in 2014, and in the next 5 years built up a fortune of over $2 million. So, what is Zollipops? It's a company that makes sugar-free lollipops and donates profits to schools for dental health education. Combining food with health is definitely one sweet way to make money and help the world. In the case of Akshay Ruparelia, technology certainly played a role in how he made money, but his idea was linked to another area where people often get rich: property. Ruparelia was still at school when he started an online estate agency. His idea allows him to take advantage of not having a physical office, but rather to use the internet. This means he is able to charge less for selling someone's home and has helped make him one of the richest people in the UK. Now, when it comes to using technology, Syed Sumail Hassan found a new way to make money. This young man hasn't designed a new app or used the internet in the same way as Ruparelia. Hassan has turned his hobby into his career. He started playing computer games at the age of 7. In 2015, he became the youngest person to win over $1 million in prize money when he won an international event. Imagine winning that much money for just playing a computer game. Another youngster who made millions doing something she loves is Jackie Ivanko. By the age of 10, Jackie had already become a household name in many countries, with millions of people watching her participate in America's Got Talent. In the following decade, she recorded 10 award-winning albums, sang in many benefit concerts and galas to raise money for NGOs, performed in the Cirque du Soleil, and still finds time to spend with her family. Finally, Australian Ben Pasternak made his first million in a slightly more traditional way, by inventing something. His first idea was an app called Impossible Rush, which was top of the app charts. Since then, Pasternak has come up with a number of other apps, and in 2016 he was included in Time magazine's list of most influential teenagers. A year later, he started Monkey, which is a video chat app for teens. So, these 5 young people show that you don't always need to be born into a rich family to be a millionaire. Sometimes, all it takes is a great idea and the ability to make that idea happen. Maybe you have an idea that could make you rich one day, and also make the world a better place.
Unit 5. Developing vocabulary and listening. Exercises 4 and 5.
Hello, and welcome to the History Podcast. In today's society, money is a necessary part of living. We work to earn a salary, we calculate how much we need to get by, we set aside a certain amount for our old age, and we occasionally splash out on the things we really want. For most of us, money is central to our lives. And whether the currency is cows, cocoa beans or cash, I think we can safely say that that has always been the case. But today, I'd like to take you back in time, back to the 1300s and to a small indigenous tribe living in the highlands of Peru. This was the origin of the great Inca Empire, which in the 15th and 16th centuries became the largest empire South America had ever known. It was a civilization rich in food, textiles, cocoa, and gold. But one of the many mysterious facts about the empire is that it operated without money. In fact, it may be the only advanced civilization in history that had no money and no commerce of any kind. William Stevens has been studying the Inca for over 30 years.
Of course, we don't know exactly why the empire developed the way it did. It may have been for many different reasons, but we know that the Inca Empire was very rich. It was so rich that it could afford to have hundreds of people who were specialised in agricultural techniques, and that might have been the key to their success. We know that they built farms on the side of mountains and chose crops that would grow in the temperatures at different altitudes. They had sophisticated irrigation methods to transport water where it was needed. In fact, we think that they were able to grow more food than they actually needed.
So here we have a population of about 12 million people, all living without money. There were no shops or markets, and without these, there was no buying or selling of goods. Yet this was a civilization that built enormous pyramids and temples, and places like the great Machu Picchu. The cities were as large as any European city, and archaeological remains show that they must have been cleaner, more organised, and better places to live. All of this was connected by a system of roads that covered almost 40,000 kilometres. That's about 3 times the diameter of the Earth. So, how did they do it?
From what we know, the government controlled everything. Instead of paying taxes in money, the Inca people worked for the state. In exchange for their work, they received all the necessities of life. That included food, tools and clothes, and care for the elderly and the sick.
But how did this rich and sophisticated culture develop without inventing money? This is one of the questions that scientists and historians who study the Incas are trying to answer. Lucy Roberts has written a book about it.
We believe it could have been because the Inca people dedicated all of their efforts to agriculture rather than economics. This is a region with an unpredictable climate. The Wari, a previous civilization, had probably already disappeared because of a lack of rain. The Inca knew that if they had another period like that, they wouldn't be able to grow food, and that was a danger to their survival. So, food was their money, and the extra that they produced allowed them to control other territories.
Eventually, it wasn't the weather, but disease brought to the continent by European invaders that was their downfall. Still, the Inca people were able to develop one of the greatest empires in history, without ever spending a cent.
Unit 5. Developing Speaking. Exercises 1 and 2.
Let me think. Both photos show young people working. In the first photo, you can see a young woman and I think she is delivering pizza. I don't think I'd like to do that job. But some of my friends have similar jobs. In the second photo, the young man in the middle of the picture might be learning about a job. I think the older man is his teacher. In the background, there are some tools or other items for them to use. One similarity is that all the people are touching or holding things. In my opinion, the young woman in the first picture is trying to earn some extra cash, whereas in the second picture, the young man might not be paid any money. Personally, I can understand the situation in both photos. Well, when you're young, it's good to have your own money to spend. It's also a good idea to learn new skills.
Unit 5. Developing Speaking. Exercise 4. 1.
In the background, I can see 2 men.
2.
In the second photo, there's a young woman.
Unit 6. Reading. The world catches cold.
Trying to define exactly what it is can be tricky. One clue is that the word comes from the combination of the Greek words for all and people. So a pandemic is a disease that affects the whole world. The difference with an epidemic is that, even though it can be serious, an epidemic is usually confined to one city, country, or region. For example, Ebola isn't a pandemic. Its spread is limited to Central and West Africa. Also, a pandemic is often caused by a new strain of a virus. This is what can make a disease incredibly unpredictable, because at first there are no vaccines to protect people. Over the centuries, there have been a number of pandemics, including the bubonic plague in the 14th century, cholera in the early 20th century, and COVID-19 in the 21st century. One of the most important pandemics was the so-called Spanish flu, which struck between 1918 and 1920. This strain of influenza infected around a third of the entire global population. Although scientists are not certain where the Spanish flu originated, it seems to have started in the United States. The World Health Organization, WHO, is responsible for keeping track of possible pandemics. They use a scale of 6 phases or stages that helps them work out how severe a possible pandemic might be. In phase 1, for example, although the virus may be circulating among animals, there are no cases of human infection. Once a human becomes infected, we are in stage 2, and so on. The change from one stage to another is not based on how many people are sick or the degree to which they are ill, but rather on how quickly the disease spreads from one area or country to another. If the outbreak of a virus or disease remains in one particular location, it is an epidemic. It is only when there have been outbreaks of the virus in several countries that we reach stage 6, and we can classify the disease as a pandemic. Contact between people causes the transmission of many diseases. This is why there are some basic precautions people should take in order to prevent the spread of an illness or virus. Of course, when a vaccine exists, vaccination is the sensible first step. But there are other basic steps that you can take, like covering your mouth and nose if you cough or sneeze, keeping your distance if you are ill, and frequently washing your hands. It might sound crazy, but many people only wash their hands after using the toilet. It's important to wash your hands far more often, for example, before you prepare food, after treating a wound, and after taking the rubbish out. Finally, if you stay fit and healthy, you stand a much better chance of not becoming ill. And if you are unfortunate enough to become ill, you'll be strong enough to fight the virus and recover. Experts believe that in today's world, we are very susceptible to pandemics. We all know that one thing that makes pandemics a real danger is the speed at which they may spread. International travel facilitates this quick spread. To this, we can now add people's increased resistance to antibiotics and the number of viruses which appear to be jumping species, that is to say, which spread from animals to humans.
Unit 6. Developing vocabulary and listening. Exercises 3 and 4.
Hi, Anna. Are you here for the class?
Hi, Martina. Yes, I am. I've heard it's really good.
I'm not sure if good is the word I'd use. It's certainly intense.
So, how does it work exactly?
Well, it's a combination of yoga and a gym workout. There are elements of yoga, but these are used in between the high-intensity exercises as a way of relaxing.
So, the yoga is a way of relaxing?
Well, I'm not sure how easy it is to relax sometimes. The teacher often gets us to do fairly complicated poses, and I feel quite stressed after those.
Yes, but yoga focuses on other parts of your body, doesn't it?
That's right. And on your mind as well.
Oh, that's exactly what I need. Are you taking any other classes?
Yes, I'm still doing spinning in the morning twice a week and aqua zumba.
Now, there's something I couldn't get into at all. I've never been a big fan of water.
Really? I love swimming. So when I saw an aqua zumba class, I just knew it was for me.
Hey, what's that?
Oh, this. It's my new fitness watch.
That's cool. What does it do?
It keeps track of lots of information connected to my fitness and exercise regime. It's waterproof, so when I go swimming, it can count the number of laps I do. It shows me my heart rate when I use the running machine or cross trainer, and after I finish my workout, I can see how many calories I've burnt. And it even measures my sleep.
Wow, that's a lot of really useful information. It must have been expensive.
Oh, I don't know. It was a present from my parents. Anyway, we should hurry up. The class will be starting soon.
Gosh, I'm exhausted. That was really tough.
Just wait until you wake up tomorrow morning. All of your muscles will be aching.
That's okay. You know what they say? No pain, no gain.
I just hope that's true. What did you like best about it?
When it was all over. I don't know, really. It was definitely a good cardio workout. There were a few times when my heart was racing so fast, I thought I was going to collapse.
I always enjoy the sit-ups.
What? I felt dizzy after we did those. And then the yoga straight after didn't help.
So, are you coming again to the next class?
Probably, but I've got a hot yoga session on Thursday.
Wow, you do hot yoga. What's it like?
It's great. It really helps me relax, and if I feel stressed, a session of hot yoga makes me feel calm and chilled out. It's also good for your muscles.
Don't you sweat too much?
That's the point of it. I prefer doing hot yoga to sitting in a sauna.
That's true. I've never really understood the attraction of that.
Right, I'm going to have a quick shower and then I'd better go. I promised my cousin I'd meet her in town and go shopping with her.
Okay. It was great catching up with you, and I hope I'll see you next week in class.
Sure. Bye.
Unit 6. Developing Speaking. Exercises 1 and 2.
I'd like you to imagine you have a friend who wants some advice on the best way to stay fit and healthy. Talk to each other about each of the ideas in the photos.
Okay. Well, these pictures show 3 very different things connected to being healthy. I think what you eat is very important.
That's true. But I don't think it's the most important thing. In my opinion, exercise is more important.
I'm not sure. A lot of people get injured playing sports or doing exercise. It's easy to sprain an ankle or pull a muscle.
I suppose so. But if you're careful, it should be okay. What do you think?
Well, I agree. But the other problem is that it takes a lot of time and people are often very busy.
You have a point. Okay, let's look at the last idea. Oh, I think this is about getting enough sleep and rest. I think people our age often go to bed very late and don't get enough sleep.
Yes, you're right, and you need to sleep properly if you want to be healthy.
Thanks. Now you have a minute to decide which of the 3 is the most important.
What do you think?
My choice would be thinking about what you eat. I know you weren't so sure.
I agree it's important, but isn't exercise more important than having a healthy diet?
I really don't agree. You don't see sports stars eating lots of junk food, do you?
That's true. Why don't we choose sleeping enough? We both think it's very important.
Yes, good idea.
Unit 6. Developing Speaking. Exercise 4. 1,
In my opinion,
2,
I suppose so.
3,
I'm not sure.
4,
That's true, but...
5,
What do you think?
6.
Yes, you're right.
Unit 6. Developing Speaking. Exercise 5. 1,
I think playing football is the best way to stay fit. What do you think?
2,
You can make lots of friends playing a team game like football, don't you think so?
3.
That's true. You don't need any expensive equipment to go jogging. Do you agree?
4.
Personally, I think playing football is better. Don't you think so?
5.
Which sport would you choose?
Unit 7. Reading. Comics Corner.
Comic books, including graphic novels, are increasingly popular. According to Comicron, sales in 2018 just in North America were over $1 billion. Now, there is no way teenagers are spending so much on these books, so it's clear that adults are reading them too. In spite of this, many people still appear to associate graphic novels with teenagers, not adults. I often hear comments saying people who read comic books and graphic novels should grow up. So I want to explain why graphic novels and comics are for people of all ages, and not just for young people. To begin with, comic strips started out in Germany in the 19th century. By the 1930s, comic books and famous weekly comic magazines started to appear in the UK. It's true that at this time the target audience was teenage boys, but soon they would grow up and still want to read comics. Besides, in quite serious newspapers, there are many examples of comic strips dealing with serious subjects. Political cartoons in newspapers are one of the best examples of how comics can criticise in ways that other writing can't. When the first graphic novels appeared in the late 1970s, one of their key features was the artwork. It is important to realise that the pictures are an integral part of graphic novels, and not simply something the authors use to illustrate the plot. To get the most out of a graphic novel, you need to learn to read the pictures and not just the text. In many ways, this links with the importance of images and visuals in today's world. It also provides a link between reading and watching films. You can tell that graphic novels have become more mainstream when you consider the increasing success of films and TV series based on them. When Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, 1986, became a film in 2012, it took in more than $5 million at the box office. Also, nowadays, more and more people consider comics an art form. The success of Joker illustrates this. For many years, critics have nominated films based on graphic novels for Oscars in categories like Best Visual Effects. However, in 2019, the film Joker, starring Joaquin Phoenix, didn't follow this trend. Not only did it win at the Venice International Film Festival, but it also earned 11 nominations, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, and Best Original Score. In a further development, it is now not uncommon to read great works of literature like Shakespeare's plays, Jane Austen's novels, and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein as graphic novels. I'm often asked what my favourite graphic novel of all time is. It is impossible for me to answer this question. If I were pushed, I'd say that, as I love travel, I love books like Shenzhen by Guy Delisle. His graphic novels give me an insight into places I might never get to visit. I also find I learn so much from graphic novels. For example, Marjan Satrapi's Persepolis taught me more about Iran in the first 5 pages than I had ever learnt before. And Graphic Science by Daryl Cunningham informed me about 7 of the greatest scientists ever, from Antoine Lavoisier to Joyce Bell Burnell. What more could you ask from a book than to be entertained and to learn something new? So, if you think graphic novels and comics are just for kids, think again.
Unit 7. Developing vocabulary and listening. Exercises 3 and 4.
Since the first film in 1977, the Star Wars series has become a worldwide pop culture phenomenon. There are Star Wars theme parks, museums, and, of course, video games. The series has produced millions of casual fans and perhaps the biggest and most dedicated group of superfans ever known. With me today is one of these superfans, Dave Barnes. Dave, what is it about Star Wars that people love so much?
Well, it's just a great story. Great heroes, great soundtrack. Everything about it is great.
When did you first get interested in it?
I was just a kid when I saw the first film. I remember queuing outside the cinema, waiting to get in. It just had a tremendous impact on me. I didn't have many friends at that time, and it was my escape, my way of dealing with things.
And then you started collecting?
That's right. I collected anything that was to do with Star Wars. I've got 400 or 500 figures now, and probably hundreds of autographs.
And are these things valuable now?
Some things are, but a lot of them I used to play with, so they were toys for me, and I've never had them valued. But the most important pieces aren't the ones that cost the most. If you spend 2 years trying to find someone who appeared in the film and then you talk to them for maybe just 2 seconds and get their autograph, that makes it more valuable. To me, anyway.
I'm not sure if everyone feels the same as you do.
No. I know some people hire private detectives to find people with toys and collector's items, and then they try to get things cheap and sell them for lots of money. That's not really what it's about, though.
What do you mean exactly?
Well, it's about meeting people who were there when the film was made. Like, there's one collector who was reading a book a few years ago, and this book claimed that George Lucas, the director, wanted to thank the president of 20th Century Fox for taking a risk on the film. So he invited the president to take a prop from the film, as a thank you present. Well, 30 years later, this collector called the president of 20th Century Fox and asked him if he still had the prop, and he did. So the guy explained that he was a big fan, and the president agreed to sell it to him. And he flew all the way to the States to get it.
That's amazing. That really is a super fan. And I know that there are lots of copies of the original props from the film, so you have to be careful, right?
Right. Some people spend years and spend thousands collecting costumes and equipment. The funny thing is that the guy who made the original props admits picking up old things for hardly any money at all because they didn't have a big budget to make the film.
But Dave, I know that it isn't only about collecting things, is it? There are lots of other ways that people celebrate the films. Can you tell us a bit about those?
Well, let me see. There was a couple who got married recently, and they're both Star Wars fans. So they had a Star Wars wedding. It was the bride, in fact, who insisted on having her father dress up as Darth Vader and walk her down the aisle. And they had stormtroopers at the ceremony and everything. You can go on special Star Wars holidays where you visit all the locations where the film was made. Lots of fans make their own Star Wars films too.
Oh yes, I've heard about those. People make their own sets and costumes and make films to post online.
That's right. And of course, we have our own special day. People have parties everywhere. They dress up in the costumes of their favourite character from the film. It's a lot of fun.
What day is that?
It's May the 4th. May the 4th be with you.
Of course. What else?
Unit 7. Developing speaking. Exercises 1 and 2.
So, I was on the train this morning, and the man sitting opposite me was reading one of the Hunger Games books.
What's wrong with that? You can't deny that the books are amazing.
Well, of course not, but that's not my point.
So, what is?
Well, he must have been in his 30s and he was reading a book written for teenagers.
I'm not sure I really understand. I really don't think that writers set out to write a book just for teens and young adults. Think about Harry Potter. In that series, for example, I'm pretty sure the author just set out to write a good story with fantastic characters.
Yes, but they published new versions of the books just for adults.
Sure, but you have to remember that the only difference was the cover. The story and everything else was the same. Don't forget that the stories are great.
True, I loved them when I was younger, but why do you think adults read those books when there are so many other books to choose from?
I agree. And there's no doubt in my mind that the films make a big difference. You only have to think of the success of the very first film in the series. Apparently, it took almost $1 billion at the box office.
Wow, that's a lot of money. I suppose you only have to look at the cinema to see why these books are so popular. It's certainly something to think about.
Talking about films, have you seen...
Unit 7. Developing Speaking. Exercise 5. 1.
There's no doubt in my mind.
2.
Just to give you an idea.
3.
I'm totally convinced that...
4.
A good example of that is...
5.
You have to remember that...
Unit 7. Developing Speaking. Exercise 6. 1.
I think that watching a band or singer live at a gig is much better than just listening to their music on your own.
2.
A good example of that is a band like Muse. Their live shows are amazing.
3.
I'm totally convinced that tickets for live gigs are too expensive.
4.
I really do think that being part of an audience adds to the enjoyment.
Unit 8. Reading. Surviving a natural disaster.
The news often reports natural disasters from around the world. From hurricanes hitting the Caribbean islands and the east coast of the US, to earthquakes in Italy, Turkey and Mexico, or tsunamis in Indonesia. These stories often grab the headlines. But do people know what to do when these disasters strike? Every year, governments and charity organisations publish information telling people exactly what to do when a disaster occurs. For example, if there is an earthquake, the advice depends on your location. If you're inside a building, you should stay where you are. You should move away from windows, get close to the floor and find a safe place. If you're outside, move away from any buildings that might collapse during the earthquake. The problem is that people don't always follow the advice that is given. Arnab Malik, a young Indian employee, was working in Santiago, Chile in 2010 when a big earthquake struck. People knew they should stay inside the building, but as Arnab told The Guardian, the moment the earthquake struck, everyone panicked and tried to get out. As a consequence, some people tripped and fell and were crushed by those running behind them. Why does this happen? Scientists have studied the way our brains react when facing a catastrophe. Studies show that people go through 3 phases when this happens. In phase 1, people can't believe this is happening to them. In phase 2, they decide what to do. In the final phase, they put their decision into action. When people panic and make the wrong decision, the results may be worse than the catastrophe itself. On the other hand, staying inside a building during an earthquake might not always work, because not all buildings can survive an earthquake. Daniela Constanz, a marketing student, told Teen Vogue that her class ran out of the building when the floors started shaking. However, the earthquake managed to knock down a kindergarten building, trapping the children inside. Daniela went to help, but everyone had been rescued by the time she arrived. Luckily, everybody survived. However, not all disasters strike suddenly. Sometimes it's possible to predict them, as with hurricanes and flooding. In these cases, the key thing is to be prepared. According to Ready, an official website of the US government, there are some essential supplies you need to have with you if you live in an area at risk of hurricanes. These supplies include water, food, a radio, batteries, and a torch. However, sometimes people may panic and overreact. For example, when people learnt that Hurricane Irma would hit Miami in 2017, the shelves in supermarkets were emptied and gas stations quickly ran out of petrol. It's as though people expected the world would end. So, surviving a natural disaster has little to do with luck, and quite a lot to do with being prepared and not panicking when it strikes.
Unit 8. Developing vocabulary and listening. Exercises 3 and 4.
Thank you for coming along to this talk this afternoon. My name is Dr. Samantha Lakefield and I'm a professor of climate studies at the university here. Tonight I'm going to be talking about climate change and the connection between extreme weather events and human behaviour. In the past 20 years or so, there have been an increasing number of voices claiming that there is a direct link between what people do and the increase in the number of extreme weather events such as hurricanes, heat waves and floods. It's well known that such events have become more frequent, but is it possible to lay all the blame on human activity? For years, scientists have been saying it's impossible to link one specific weather event to climate change. They have pointed out that there have always been extreme weather events. However, as Haruka Mizushima, now acting director of the Environmental Change Institute, has said, if scientists won't make the link, someone else will. And they will often have their own reasons for doing this. So, Haruka and her colleagues at the ECI have spent a number of years carrying out research to see if they could say whether climate change has made extreme weather events more likely. They use weather models to compare what would happen to the weather if greenhouse gases were removed from the environment, and what is happening because of the high level of greenhouse gases, which are mostly produced by humans. In the summer of 2018, there was a heat wave in many countries around the world. In Japan, more than 22,000 people were taken to hospital as temperatures in the country reached 41.1 degrees Celsius. In the Arctic Circle, there were huge wildfires. Not something you would expect there. In July, Otto published a report that showed that climate change caused by humans made heat waves such as these twice as likely to happen. The scientists at ECI have looked at lots of different weather events and found similar results for many of them, although not for all. Another aspect that scientists can look at is not only if such extreme weather is more likely, but also whether it is made worse, in other words, more intense. Scientists hope that this kind of research will help governments plan so that they can cope with extreme weather events in the future. In addition, it might be possible to use these models to predict what could happen in the future if temperatures carry on increasing. For example, if the temperature increases by just 1 degree, heat waves like those in the summer of 2018 could be 4 times as likely. It might not be possible to say that any single weather event is caused directly by the actions of humans. However, we can say that our behaviour is an important factor, and possibly the most important one. Thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, I'll stay on after the event and I'm happy to answer them.
Unit 8. Developing Speaking. Exercises 1 and 2.
Have you seen this graph about natural disasters in the world?
Yes, it's very worrying. Don't you agree?
I don't know. It looks as if some things have got a bit better since 2005.
Well, that was certainly the worst year for storms and floods, but the total number of natural disasters has still increased over the last 20 years or so.
That's true, but geophysical events have remained about the same.
What are geophysical events?
Things like earthquakes and volcanic eruptions.
Well, they aren't really connected to climate change like other disasters. Look at how the number of floods has increased since 1995. Between 1995 and 2005, they nearly doubled in number.
Yes, but since then they've fallen.
That's true, but there were still a lot more floods in 2015 than there were in 1995. I think that's quite worrying.
There were also a lot of storms. I guess they are connected. It looks as if there were about 80 in 1995, increasing to around 130 in 2005. There was a decrease of about a third in the next 5 years, but since then the number of storms has gone up again.
At least it looks as if there's good news when it comes to the number of wildfires and extreme heat. Look, since 2000, the numbers have steadily gone down by about half.
Yes, but this diagram stops in 2015, and the forest fires in Australia and California in 2019 were particularly terrible. However, personally, I think the most worrying information is connected to droughts.
Why? There aren't as many droughts as floods.
That's true. But look, in 1995, there were just around 5, and in 2000 that number had increased to more than 25. That's a 500% increase. I know the number seems to have stayed about the same since then, but that's a really big increase.
Yes, you're right. I guess that isn't good news for anyone, but I still think floods are the worst as there are so many.
Yes, I guess I agree. Let's hope things get better, though. We're much more concerned about our climate than people were in the past.
Unit 8. Developing Speaking. Exercise 3.
The graph shows the changes in 5 different types of natural disasters between 1995 and 2015. It can clearly be seen that floods occurred most frequently in the period, starting with just under 100 cases in 1995. This number doubled by 2005, and then it slowly decreased to around 160 in 2015. The number of storms shows a similar pattern, increasing from about 80 in 1995 to 130 in 2005. This number decreased by about a third in the next 5 years before increasing again. Disasters like wildfires and extreme heat show a sharp increase between 1995 and 2000, before gradually decreasing in the next 15 years. Droughts are the least common events, with about 5 in 1995. However, by 2000, this number increased by around 500%, before the numbers remained about the same for the rest of the period. Finally, geophysical events fluctuated a lot over the 25 years, with small changes in the numbers.
Unit 8. Developing Speaking. Exercise 4. 1,
1995.
2,
2005.
3,
2015. 2015.
4,
150.
5,
A third.
6,
500%.
Unit 9. Reading. What's that?
The React channel on YouTube showed some young people technology from the 1980s and asked them to identify what each gadget was used for. Their reactions were shown in a short video called Do Teens Know 80s Technology? One of the funniest things about the video was the teens' reactions to the technology used 20 years before they were born. The first piece of technology they were shown was an old-style VCR, or video cassette recorder. These were used to play VHS cassette tapes. Most of them initially thought they were looking at a radio. What was really interesting was watching the surprised reaction of one girl when she pressed the eject button and a compartment popped up from the top of the machine. Two of the boys remembered watching films on VCRs when they were very young, and one of them commented that he had never seen one that bulky. Of course, today, most people download films or watch them by streaming. When confronted with one of the first ever mobile phones, the first 3 participants thought it must be a landline phone because of its size. At that moment, a girl took out her small, shiny mobile phone and held it up to compare the two. And she pointed out just how much the technology had changed over the past few decades. Then, one of the girls asked where you stored that phone, and they were shown a clip from a film called Black Monday so they could see how that mobile phone was used. In it, one of the characters proudly showed his cutting-edge mobile phone. It was so big that he had to carry it around in his hand because it wouldn't fit into his pocket. Towards the end of the programme, one of the participants was given an old Walkman to try to figure out how it worked. One of the girls said that it was the most difficult piece of technology to use that she had seen so far. She put on the headphones, but then couldn't find the on button. All in all, watching these young people struggle to get the old technology to work showed how much technology has changed. Nowadays, we take it for granted that young people can use any technology because they are surrounded by it. However, it's clear from this show that, faced with technology they've never seen before, they are just as perplexed as older people are today in front of the latest smartphone. Nowadays, we think that all the technology we have is amazing and cutting edge. However, the same was true back in the 1980s, so it's very interesting to look back and consider how much things have changed. Probably the biggest changes have to do with the size of things. All the gadgets the young people were shown in Do Teens Know 80s Technology looked huge. Another difference was the limited functions of the 1980s technology. The mobile phone they were shown could only be used to make phone calls. But then the first text message wasn't sent until 1992. Of course, nowadays our mobile phones can be used to send emails, take photos, listen to music, and for lots of other functions. In fact, in a 2017 survey conducted by mobiles.co.uk, making calls didn't make the list of top 10 uses for mobile phones.
Unit 9. developing vocabulary and listening. Exercises 3 and 4.
On the programme today, we are going to hear from 3 people talking about a special type of technology. Our first guest is Amy Sanders, who works to provide water in developing countries.
Thanks, Susanna. When we think of technology, we usually think about high-tech devices like laptops, smartphones, and other gadgets that make our lives easier. However, for many people in different parts of the world, the most useful technology is actually very basic, but it makes an enormous difference to their lives. Probably 2 of the most important inventions are connected to health. The first of these is simple and effective water filters. They are very useful because millions of people around the world do not have access to safe drinking water. Drinking unsafe water can make people very ill, and sometimes they may even die. The second invention is rehydration salts. 30 years ago, about 5 million children under the age of 5 died every year from illnesses like diarrhea, which caused dehydration. These 2 inventions have saved lives of many adults and many young children.
Our second speaker is Paul Thomas, who is going to talk to us about greener ways of cooking.
Hi. At home, how do you cook your food? Most of us probably have ovens or microwaves that are easy to use. However, in many countries, people have to cook using a very basic piece of equipment called a stove. Stoves have 2 major problems. The first is that to cook on them, people have to burn wood. Consequently, they need to cut down trees, thus damaging the environment. The second problem is that when people do their cooking, they end up breathing in the smoke from the wood, and this can damage their lungs. For the past 50 years, many organisations have tried to design cleaner ways of cooking. Probably the cleanest cookers are those that use sunlight and are called solar power cookers. Of course, the main problem with these is that you can only really cook on sunny days.
And finally, Eric Rowe, who lives in South Africa.
Good morning. One activity that is essential to survival in many countries and is usually done by women and girls is collecting water. To many of you, this will sound amazing, as when you are at home, you just turn on a tap and water comes out. But in some regions, the water people use to drink, cook and wash often has to be carried long distances from a well or a river to where people live. Well, just imagine having to walk long distances carrying all the water you need in buckets. To solve this problem, 2 South African engineers invented the Hippo Roller. This is a tank that can be filled with up to 90 litres of water, which is almost 5 times as much as can be carried in a bucket. Once full, the tank is turned on its side and can be rolled along the ground. It sounds so simple, doesn't it? Yet it is inventions like these that help millions of people.
So, what we have learned is that technology doesn't have to be expensive or complicated. Some of the most useful inventions are simple and don't cost a lot.
Unit 9. Developing Speaking. Exercises 1, 2 and 3.
So, would you say that technology is always good?
Well, I really can't see any reason why it isn't.
Don't you think it makes us lazy and also stops us from spending time with people?
Sorry, but I don't understand what you're getting at.
What I'm saying is that some people spend a lot of their time alone in their rooms, online, and not getting any exercise.
Sorry, I'm not with you. Are you saying that we shouldn't play computer games?
No, that's not quite what I mean. There's nothing wrong with playing computer games, but there should be a balance.
What do you mean?
That it's okay to go online for an hour or so a day, but the rest of the time you should be going out and actually meeting friends and spending time with them. Are you following me?
Yes, I think so. If I understand you correctly, you think computer games are making teenagers antisocial?
Yes, that's exactly what I mean.
I'm not sure if I totally agree. After all, I've now got friends in Brazil, Japan, and Australia. That wouldn't be possible without online gaming. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes, but they aren't really your friends. They're just people you've met online.
Well, I know more about them than most of the people in my class at school.
In other words, you've become lazy and haven't spent time getting to know the people in your class because you're too busy playing games on your computer with people who you don't even know properly.
Hey, that's not true.
Unit 9. Developing Speaking. Exercise 5. 1.
Are you with me?
2.
Could you go over that again?
3.
Do you see what I mean?
4.
Sorry, I'm not with you.
5.
What do you mean when you say...
6.
What I mean is that...
Unit 9. Developing Speaking. Exercise 6. 1.
People under 14 shouldn't be allowed to use social media.
2.
I think technology has made the generation gap wider. Parents just don't understand the interests and lifestyles of young people today.
3.
People rely too much on technology. When technology breaks down, they can't cope.
Unit 10. Reading. A smelling tongue.
When you see a snake stick out its tongue, what is it doing? The answer is it's using it to smell things. When the tongue is in the air, it picks up tiny chemical particles that help it smell things, like dirt, plants, and other animals. Amazingly, new research has found that human tongues can also smell things. This shouldn't really be a surprise, as for a long time we have known there is a link between taste and smell. However, it was usually thought that the connection took place in the brain. 2 studies published in Current Biology and Chemical Senses both show that the link is probably much more complex. One of them looked precisely at what happened when the part of the brain linked to taste was removed in rats. The findings were amazing. The rats not only lost their sense of taste, but also their sense of smell. Of course, just because this happened with rats doesn't mean it will happen with humans. However, as rats are often used to test medicines that humans later use, it isn't impossible. If it is true that the cells on our tongue smell as well as taste the food we eat, this could help scientists develop cures for illnesses connected to our diet.
Man has spider in his ear.
When you read the headline, it sounds like a nightmare, doesn't it? Well, This is exactly what happened to a man in eastern China. The man, who lived in Jiangsu province, went to his doctor and told him he had a strange sensation in his right ear. At first, the doctor couldn't see anything. However, when he used a special instrument, he could see a tiny spider inside the patient's ear. The spider had made a web which almost covered the eardrum. The doctor tried to remove the spider using some tweezers. As he didn't succeed, he used salt water to flush out the spider. Luckily, because the man had been to the doctor quickly, there was no damage. But things could have been very different. While it's unusual for spiders and insects to live in someone's ear, this is not the only time that it has happened. In fact, a variety of insects have been found alive in other parts of the human body. Recently, a 29-year-old woman in Taiwan went to hospital complaining of severe pain in her eyes. When a doctor examined her, he found 4 bees living under her eyelids. The doctor managed to remove the 4 creatures which were still alive. He also said that the woman had been very lucky. If she had rubbed her eyes, she could have squashed the bees. If this had happened, she could have gone blind.
Unit 10. Developing vocabulary and listening. Exercises 3 and 4.
On today's podcast, we're going to be talking about TV journalism and, in particular, the different jobs young people can think of if they want to work in this area. To begin with, let's focus on the jobs people usually consider when they think of working in TV news. The first jobs that come to mind are those of the people who are always in front of the camera. On the TV news, the first person the audience sees is the news anchor or presenter. This is the person who presents the stories, interviews guests, and talks with the reporters. The reporters are the other people the public often get to see a lot of on TV news programmes. However, there are lots of people the public never get to see. These people who work behind the camera include the camera operators or people like the researchers and the news director. This last person plans the order of the items on the news and makes sure the quality of the programme is good. Of course, there are lots of other people involved in putting the news together, and in recent years, new jobs have been created. One of these jobs is that of social media manager. Most newspapers and TV news organisations also have a website where news stories are posted. The social media manager is responsible for putting the stories online, as well as using different social media platforms to communicate with the readers. So, as you can see, there are lots of different jobs that people can do when it comes to news and the media. You might be shy or not very good with words, but this certainly doesn't mean you can't work in journalism. I'd also like to look at some of the most famous journalists around, as I think it's useful to know about people who have been successful. I'll start with Kate Adie, who used to be the BBC's chief news correspondent. In her 40-year-long career, Adie has reported on some of the most important events around the world. Another well-known female journalist is Christiane Amanpour, who works for CNN in the US. She has won lots of awards for her reporting and is believed to be the journalist most world leaders follow on Twitter. Both Adie and Amanpour are mainstream journalists on TV. Other mainstream journalists work on radio or write for newspapers. Of course, in recent years, the way people get their news has been changing. A survey of teenagers in the US in 2019 found that more than half got their news from social media platforms. Among the most important news sources for these teenagers were celebrities and influencers on platforms such as Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Often, these celebrities are very young and have had no training as journalists. These include people such as Tavi Gevinson, who already had 229,000 followers by the age of 17. She first came to fame when she started a fashion blog called Style Rookie at the age of 12. Another person who took advantage of technology was Marquez Brownlee. At the age of 14, he started uploading basic videos to YouTube. Since then, he's gone on to become recognised as one of the best-known tech reviewers around, which shows that you don't need formal training to be good at your job. It's quite clear that with the internet and social media, there are an increasing number of opportunities for young people to break into journalism. It also looks as if the shape of news is changing, both in terms of content and in how people get the news they want. Whether this is a good thing or not is another question, and possibly one we will try to look at in a future podcast. Anyway, for now, goodbye, and I hope you enjoyed listening.
Unit 10. Developing Speaking. Exercises 1 and 2.
Today, I'm going to talk about violence in the news. It is true that a lot of stories in the news are about bad things like crime, murder, and war. These stories are important, and we need to know about them. But that doesn't mean that they need to be on the front page or be shown first on the TV news. I know some people say that everyone needs to know what is happening in the world. Even so, I still believe that it is better to have violent stories inside newspapers or later during the TV news. Having said that, you can't argue with the fact that TV programmes that show violence are usually on later in the evening, when very young children have gone to bed. In conclusion, I accept that people need to know about these news stories, but I think this needs to be done carefully. Let's not forget that people can be influenced by what they see and hear. This is one reason why some people want to ban violent video games, and I think that the same argument can be used when we talk about violent news stories.
Unit 10. Developing Speaking. Exercise 4. 1.
You can't deny that.
2.
I would still say that.
3.
That doesn't alter my opinion that...
4.
There's no denying that.
5.
But that doesn't mean that.
Exam Trainer. Listening, Part 1. Exercise 1. You will hear people talking in 3 different situations. For each question, choose the correct answer. 1. You will hear a sports star talking about her childhood. What did she find difficult?
When I was a kid, my family wasn't that interested in sport, so I had to learn everything at school. In many ways, that was good because it meant I was taught all the techniques for playing all sorts of team games properly, and that, in the end, was what allowed me to specialise in baseball. But, of course, there wasn't the individual input which is what parents can give you after school or at weekends. I ended up relying on my friends to help me, though they weren't as committed as me, so it was a bit erratic.
Now listen again.
When I was a kid, my family wasn't that interested in sport, so I had to learn everything at school. In many ways, that was good because it meant I was taught all the techniques for playing all sorts of team games properly, and that, in the end, was what allowed me to specialise in baseball. But, of course, there wasn't the individual input which is what parents can give you after school or at weekends. I ended up relying on my friends to help me, though they weren't as committed as me, so it was a bit erratic.
2. You will hear two friends talking about a shop they want to go to. What is the girl worried about?
OK, shall we go to that new games shop this afternoon?
Yeah, I really want to. Did you check the opening times, though? It's new, so Martin said it had restricted opening hours. We don't want to go all the way there and find that it's closed.
It says Monday afternoon, so it should be OK. Apparently, they've got some amazing new games that they've imported especially.
Ha! I bet they cost a fortune. Worth it, though, if they're good.
Yes, we can always buy it together and share.
I'm really excited. All the other shops sell the same as each other, so you never see anything different.
Yeah, you're right.
Now listen again.
OK, shall we go to that new games shop this afternoon?
Yeah, I really want to. Did you check the opening times, though? It's new, so Martin said it had restricted opening hours. We don't want to go all the way there and find that it's closed.
It says Monday afternoon, so it should be OK. Apparently, they've got some amazing new games that they've imported especially.
Ha! I bet they cost a fortune. Worth it, though, if they're good.
Yes, we can always buy it together and share.
I'm really excited. All the other shops sell the same as each other, so you never see anything different.
Yeah, you're right.
3. You will hear part of an interview with a careers officer. What is he doing?
What do you find most interesting about your job?
It's always good to work with young people and help them achieve their ambitions. It's inspiring, really, and I'm glad to be able to open their minds to new ideas.
And do all the students in their final year use your services?
I wish they did. I do encourage them to, but they're not always focused on the future. In fact, often the most interesting interviews are with students who are still struggling to sort out what they want to do.
So, would you recommend your job as a career?
Yes, a lot of teachers do it when they retire from teaching.
Now listen again.
What do you find most interesting about your job?
It's always good to work with young people and help them achieve their ambitions. It's inspiring, really, and I'm glad to be able to open their minds to new ideas.
And do all the students in their final year use your services?
I wish they did. I do encourage them to, but they're not always focused on the future. In fact, often the most interesting interviews are with students who are still struggling to sort out what they want to do.
So, would you recommend your job as a career?
Yes, a lot of teachers do it when they retire from teaching.
Exam Trainer. Listening, Part 2. Exercise 2. You will hear a student called Luca talking about how to manage your first day at college. For each question, complete the sentences with a word or short phrase.
Hi, I've just completed my first day at college, and it wasn't nearly as scary as I expected it to be. It's always difficult when you're walking into a situation where you don't know anyone, but you can do some things which will help make the day easier. So I'm going to use today's podcast to give you some tips. I guess, as with everything in life, it's always a good idea to think about what's going to happen and to make some plans where you can. So make sure you know where you're going so you're not late. I found it helpful, for instance, to try out the bus journey the day before so I knew how long it would take me to get there. When you arrive, there'll be a set programme for all the new students to show you around and explain how things work, so there's a lot of listening. But there are also a lot of breaks, and it's a good idea to take this time to get to know other students. You'll also have the opportunity to meet various people who work at the university and who can help you. So make sure you find out the person who's responsible in student services, so you've got someone to go to when you are stuck. The programme won't take all day, and once you've done a tour of the college, I'm sure you'll be free to go wherever you want. Rather than rushing off back home, it's a good idea to chat to one of your new friends and maybe go and explore the city together. Even if you know it well, they may be glad of the company.
Now listen again.
Hi, I've just completed my first day at college, and it wasn't nearly as scary as I expected it to be. It's always difficult when you're walking into a situation where you don't know anyone, but you can do some things which will help make the day easier. So I'm going to use today's podcast to give you some tips. I guess, as with everything in life, it's always a good idea to think about what's going to happen and to make some plans where you can. So make sure you know where you're going so you're not late. I found it helpful, for instance, to try out the bus journey the day before so I knew how long it would take me to get there. When you arrive, there'll be a set programme for all the new students to show you around and explain how things work, so there's a lot of listening. But there are also a lot of breaks, and it's a good idea to take this time to get to know other students. You'll also have the opportunity to meet various people who work at the university and who can help you. So make sure you find out the person who's responsible in student services, so you've got someone to go to when you are stuck. The programme won't take all day, and once you've done a tour of the college, I'm sure you'll be free to go wherever you want. Rather than rushing off back home, it's a good idea to chat to one of your new friends and maybe go and explore the city together. Even if you know it well, they may be glad of the company.
Exam Trainer. Listening, Part 3. Exercise 3. You will hear 3 short extracts in which people are talking about films. For each question, choose from the list A to E what each speaker says about films. There are 2 extra letters which you do not need to use. Speaker 1.
I don't really bother going to the cinema much anymore because you can get so much at home, and I don't agree that you lose some of the effects. I know films nowadays all have some CGI and the sound is supposed to surround you, but if you've got a big TV, which I have, you can get the same effect at home without all the irritation of people moving and making a noise around you. I find I can lose myself in a film much more easily from the comfort of my own sofa.
Speaker 2.
I used to love going to the cinema and waiting for new films to come out, then going and talking about them with my friends. But it's so expensive now, and I don't think there's that same excitement around the release date because it isn't really exclusive. When I watch at home, I can be with my friends and we can talk about it all the way through without annoying anyone. Also, if a film's rubbish, you can just stop it and not feel you've wasted any money. And some films are really long, so I can just watch them in stages, which I prefer.
Speaker 3.
I think when we're talking about films, we have to include TV because that has become so much more important now. And that's where all the money is in the industry, in my view. I mean, there's some really fantastic TV series, whereas I think cinema just relies on special effects and lots of noise, but you get really good plot lines in TV. Because they have more time to develop a series, like over 8 or 10 hours, it's so much more involving. And if you're really keen, you can binge watch back to back to get that cinematic effect.
Now listen again. Speaker 1.
I don't really bother going to the cinema much anymore because you can get so much at home, and I don't agree that you lose some of the effects. I know films nowadays all have some CGI and the sound is supposed to surround you, but if you've got a big TV, which I have, you can get the same effect at home without all the irritation of people moving and making a noise around you. I find I can lose myself in a film much more easily from the comfort of my own sofa.
Speaker 2.
I used to love going to the cinema and waiting for new films to come out, then going and talking about them with my friends. But it's so expensive now, and I don't think there's that same excitement around the release date because it isn't really exclusive. When I watch at home, I can be with my friends and we can talk about it all the way through without annoying anyone. Also, if a film's rubbish, you can just stop it and not feel you've wasted any money. And some films are really long, so I can just watch them in stages, which I prefer.
Speaker 3.
I think when we're talking about films, we have to include TV because that has become so much more important now. And that's where all the money is in the industry, in my view. I mean, there's some really fantastic TV series, whereas I think cinema just relies on special effects and lots of noise, but you get really good plot lines in TV. Because they have more time to develop a series, like over 8 or 10 hours, it's so much more involving. And if you're really keen, you can binge watch back to back to get that cinematic effect.
Exam Trainer. Listening, Part 4. Exercise 4. You will hear an interview with a teenager called Sam, who's talking about transport in her city. For each question, choose the correct answer.
Okay, my guest today is Sam, and she's a student who lives in Hong Kong. Now, concerns about climate mean we're all more interested in using public transport systems, and the one in Hong Kong is very heavily used, isn't it? Why do you think that is, Sam?
Well, believe it or not, the whole system is really, really good. We've just got a very efficient system that's been well planned, and there are different modes you can use, like the rapid transit system or the trams, for example. You could actually say that the journeys are really pleasant, and I think this is evident in the fact that Hong Kong has got one of the highest usership rates in the world, and it's efficiently done all on one payment system.
It sounds wonderful. Why do you think it's so good?
Well, it's a super modern system, so, for example, if we look at the rapid transit network, all the train carriages have air conditioning and you can get good Wi-Fi all along the system. But I'm not sure we could argue that that's why people use it. The real difference compared to many other city systems is the way the system stretches across the city. It's incredibly well integrated into the centre and shopping centres and so on. And it's extraordinary
given the limited space in Hong Kong, that the system never feels crowded.
And you have trams as well, don't you? I gather you prefer those.
Yes, the trams are always my first choice. Did you know we're one of the few places in the world that have double-decker trams? If you go up to the top deck, it's like riding round a theme park. I always think it's amazing that something that gives you such a fantastic view of the city and the different lives going on there is so cheap. You could just ride around on it for fun even if you had nowhere to go.
Now listen again.
OK, my guest today is Sam, and she's a student who lives in Hong Kong. Now, concerns about climate mean we're all more interested in using public transport systems. And the one in Hong Kong is very heavily used, isn't it? Why do you think that is, Sam?
Well, believe it or not, the whole system is really, really good. We've just got a very efficient system that's been well planned, and there are different modes you can use, like the rapid transit system or the trams, for example. You could actually say that the journeys are really pleasant, and I think this is evident in the fact that Hong Kong has got one of the highest usership rates in the world, and it's efficiently done all on one payment system.
It sounds wonderful. Why do you think it's so good?
Well, it's a super modern system, so, for example, if we look at the rapid transit network, all the train carriages have air conditioning and you can get good Wi-Fi all along the system. But I'm not sure we could argue that that's why people use it. The real difference compared to many other city systems is the way the system stretches across the city. It's incredibly well integrated into the centre and shopping centres and so on. And it's extraordinary, given the limited space in Hong Kong, that the system never feels crowded.
And you have trams as well, don't you? I gather you prefer those.
Yes, the trams are always my first choice. Did you know we're one of the few places in the world that have double-decker trams? If you go up to the top deck, it's like riding round a theme park. I always think it's amazing that something that gives you such a fantastic view of the city and the different lives going on there is so cheap. You could just ride around on it for fun even if you had nowhere to go.